Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Kris. This is part 2. Father of America's Navy. Oh, come on. Come on, there you go. Father of America's Navy, John Paul Jones, JPJ in the house. This is chapter 4, Blend In. Before we get started, thumbs up, subscribe. That's how easy it would take. Click, click. Then you can donate to the channel through the thanks button. Purely an option. If you do, you can request a video. Your name sponsors that video. All right, let's get into part 2.
So he sails across the Atlantic, he's about to France, and then one of his spotters sees 17 sails off in the distance, and he's thinking, surely, this is a British supply convoy, we're gonna fuck all them up, then we'll go to France. And the crew's actually pumped about this, because by this point in the war, the United States government had decided that whenever a US Navy ship captures a British ship, the crew would get a portion of the money that they captured, and this was gonna help them with naval recruiting, so not everybody wanted to go be a privateer and do a bunch of pirate shit. So the crew's pumped, they're ecstatic, they're chasing down this supply convoy. They're all going to make a bunch of money. It's going to be awesome. They get up on this supply convoy and they have the oh shit moment because yeah, it's a big British supply convoy, but it's being escorted by the HMS Invincible, a massive British warship with 74 fucking cannons on it.
We're all going to die together out here. You're a good group of boys to die with, I'll tell you that much.
Now they're kind of screwed because they approach the convoy from the rear. So if they peel off and turn around, the HMS Invincible is probably going to see them and they're going to chase them down and they're absolutely going to sink them. So John Paul Jones, master of fuckery, immediately pulls down anything that would signify that they're Americans and just pulls in with the rest of the convoy and pretends to be a British merchant ship all day long until nightfall. And then under the cover of dark, he turns the ship around and goes straight to France. They make a clean getaway. Nobody knew they were even there. So the USS Ranger and John Paul Jones make it into France on December 2nd, 1977. And pretty much as soon as they get there, he finds out that the French gave away the frigate to somebody else.
You what?
Perfect, great. Sailed across the Atlantic Ocean for literally nothing. This is fantastic. So he ends up linking up with Benjamin Franklin. They end up becoming buddies. He's hanging out with all the aristocrats in France, rubbing elbows. And eventually he realizes he's not gonna get the ship he wants. So he's like, fuck it. Why don't you guys just cut me loose and let me go do my thing? And that's exactly what he gets. The orders he receives are, and I quote, distress the enemy. And that's exactly what he do. Britain is already writing newspaper articles about John Paul Jones basically being a pirate after raiding Nova Scotia. They want to see a pirate. He's going to show them what a pirate does. He absolutely covers the deck of the USS Ranger in swivel guns. He gets his hands on every musket and blunderbuss he can find, loads up on Marines and sailors, and sets off towards Whitehaven. Whitehaven is a major port that he's familiar with that's going to have hundreds of ships in its harbor, a major coal outpost, and he is going to go there and try to burn down every ship in the harbor. He is going to be the first man to attack Britain on its own home turf in over 100 years. And that stat's cool to say and all, but you need to appreciate the real strategic genius of what he's actually about to go do. By attacking Great Britain on its own home turf in 100 years, nobody is alive today in Great Britain at this point in time that has ever seen Britain be attacked ever. So if he can pull this off, it's going to be absolutely huge. It's going to freak out the British population and it's going to send the message to the British like, hey, you guys are busy projecting your power all the way across the Atlantic Ocean. You're taking your massive navy and you're sending them over to America to mess with us. And if you do that, we're going to send people to mess with you. And that's going to force the British Navy to pull back a significant amount of their ships just to patrol their own borders. Okay, if you're not picking up what I'm putting down, let me put this into like modern context. Imagine if during the global war on terror, ISIS or Al-Qaeda somehow got their hands on a battleship and invaded Miami, okay? It'd be fucking freaky. So the USS Ranger sets off towards Whitehaven. As they're leaving the harbor in France, they fire their cannons, saluting one of the French naval vessels as they pass by, and that French naval vessel returns the salute, okay? This is a humongous deal. It's the first time it ever happened in US naval history. Firing the cannons back in salute meant that you recognize this nation as its own sovereign entity and you recognize their authority, and this was the first time in American history that it ever happened. So the USS Ranger is headed towards Whitehaven, and John Paul Jones's lieutenant lets him know, like, hey, there's some of the members in the crew that want to have a mutiny. They think this is a crazy plan, and they kind of want to throw John Paul Jones in shackles and sail back to America. Luckily, not all the crew is against John Paul Jones on this, especially the Marines who are there to keep order, and they've had his back the entire time. They kind of tamp down the mutiny and continue towards Whitehaven to go on this mission. So they arrive there on April 23rd, 1778, and early morning hours, he has to make a decision how he's going to go about this. And what he figures is he can't take the whole crew out because half the crew's mutinous, so he's going to end up leaving the Marines with with the ship because he doesn't want to leave the mutinous crew there. He doesn't want to take them with him because he doesn't trust them. He doesn't want to leave them there alone because they might steal the ship and leave him stranded. So the Marines are going to stay there with the mutinous crew, hold them on the ship, make sure they don't leave John Paul Jones and the men that he has loyal to him. So he's going to go out in rowboats in 2 groups of 15. You got John Paul in one group, and then you got 15 sailors in the other. John Paul Jones is going to take his men. They're going to scale the walls of the fort. They're going to sneak in, kill the guards if they have to, and then they're going to take nails and they're going to hammer them into the ignition holes of the cannon, rendering the cannons absolutely useless so that they don't get shot at. And while that's going on, the other crew is going to go out to the harbor with lanterns and burn every ship to the ground. So John Paul Jones and his crew go, they scale the walls to the fort. The guards are asleep. He's trying to be quiet, doesn't kill them, doesn't fire a shot, trying to be stealthy, goes in, renders all the cannons completely useless. So at this point, John Paul Jones is thinking, okay, good, that's taken care of. Now he's going to go out in the harbor and help the rest of his men burn 100 ships down. He looks out into the harbor. There is a distinct lack of shit on fire. So he goes out there, he's looking for his men. He's like, what the fuck is going on? And then he starts hearing alarms going off. The people in the town are waking up. They realize they're being invaded and they're setting off alarms. He finally finds his other group of men and half of them are drunk. And he's like, what the fuck is going on? It's raining. The lanterns couldn't light very well. They were trying to light ships on fire. They got one ship to actually start burning. It didn't even burn down all the way because everything's raining and wet and they couldn't get a fire started. So apparently the other group of sailors said, fuck it, we're gonna go break into a bar and drink all their booze. And that is what alerted the people in the town, and they're now setting off the alarms. So John Paul Jones is like, fuck it, now we have to leave. So they go, they board the USS Ranger and they take off. So they make their clean getaway. At this point,
You gotta love that. We're gonna burn down all these ships. We can't keep the fire going, so let's just get drunk instead. Yeah, it's reasonable. Good trade-off.
John Paul Jones is like, all right, not exactly what I have in mind, but we're doing pirate shit. What should we do next? We're in Whitehaven. That's really close to St. Mary's Isle. St. Mary's Isle is where the Earl of Selkirk lives. We're going to be able to make it there in a couple hours. So we're going to go there. We're going to kidnap the Earl of Selkirk, and then we're going to trade him for a bunch of American prisoners. And that's going to send a message that we're actually targeting British nobility now. So they get in, they break into the Earl's estate. He's not home, but Lady Selkirk is. Now at this point, his crew is like, let's plunder and steal absolutely everything so we can all sell it and get a big payday. And John Paul Jones is like, no, we're not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to steal one thing. We're going to steal their silver plate, you know, like the silver dining dish for like a tea set. We're going to steal that and only that, and then we're going to leave. Okay, this is perfect. It's the perfect plan, and here's why. Because by stealing the silver plate, it just ruins the entire tea set, which, is that a big deal? No, of course not. But to fancy British nobility, it's the end of the world that grown men broke into their house, and there are now ramifications for their government actions, and it's going to spread across the nobility fucking circles like wildfire that, hey, we can get attacked too, and it's going to negatively impact us also. Okay, but here's why it's actually the perfect plan. All right, now most historians are going to tell you that the crew wanted to plunder everything, and John Paul Jones didn't want to plunder anything, and he resisted and he fought them, and he ended up brokering this deal where he only let them steal one silver plate. Okay, I'm going to call bullshit on that. It just doesn't make sense if you've ever talked to another grown adult ever. In my super duper not expert opinion, John Paul Jones did this because he wanted to bang Lady Selkirk.
What do you mean by that?
And hear me out, because by stealing the one silver plate, he's pulled off the old, I left my hoodie at your house trick, and now I have an excuse to come back later. And I know this because after they boarded their ship and left, he wrote Lady Selkirk a letter where he sincerely apologized, and it wasn't his idea, and he was gonna buy the plate back from his crew and deliver it to her himself. But that doesn't prove that he wanted to sleep with her. If anything, it proves my point that he wanted to be a gentleman and do the right thing. But maybe if it wasn't for the fact that he made duplicates of that letter and sent copies of it to his homie back in France, Benjamin Franklin. Okay, that's really significant for 2 reasons. 1, this is a 1700s equivalent of taking screenshots of you spitting game and sending it to your friends. And 2, he sent it to Benjamin Franklin, the most notorious womanizer out of any other founding father ever.
You know, I invented electricity. I'm sensing a little electricity right here.
Didn't Ben Franklin have syphilis?
Yes, but I don't.
Okay, this is probably shocking to a lot of you, okay? Because you think of Ben Franklin and you think of the pictures of the old guy with the balding mullet that's kind of chubby, and you're like, oh, he invented a lot of shit and he's a founding father. Yeah, that's all true, but this dude's entire life, he was slinging dick like it was a going out of business sale. Benjamin Franklin literally invented the odometer, okay? They didn't have cars back then. What the fuck you tracking mileage for? He didn't do it so he could figure out how many miles he had left on his Prius. He did it so he could keep track of how many miles of pipe he laid. Okay, there is hundreds upon hundreds, if not thousands of letters of correspondence between Benjamin Franklin and women of nobility where he is doing nothing but spitting straight game the entire time. Okay, in 1745, Benjamin Franklin published a paper called Advice on Young Men in Their Choice of Mistress. Not wife, not female companion, mistress. Okay, I'm not going to read the entire thing for you. You can take the time and read it on your own. You should. It's absolutely hilarious. But to summarize it, it's essentially a PowerPoint of why you should be sleeping with cougars for fun. My favorite line from it is, and I quote, "The sin is less. The debauchering of a virgin may ruin her and make her life unhappy." Okay, translation, if I sleep with her first, I'm going to ruin her for everybody else. Which I cannot stress to you enough is an outrageous thing to say right now, let alone in the 1700s. Don't worry, I've got more receipts for this than I've got time. Horace Walpole, a British writer, once wrote, "He's too much the favorite of the ladies to escape their notice." Okay, John Adams, you know, like the other founding father, John Adams, once wrote, "The life of Dr. Franklin was a scene of continual dissipation." Okay, translation, Benjamin Franklin gets more pussy than an animal shelter. In his own autobiography, Ben Franklin said, and I quote, "I frequent intimacies with low women." Okay, if you're not picking up what I put down, I'm trying to tell you that John Paul Jones didn't just send a letter to his friend, okay? He submitted his homework to get graded by the master.
"You have been well trained, my young apprentice. They will be no match for you."
Okay, do you see now? Do you see why it's the perfect plan? He steals one singular silver plate. Now, that's going to spread throughout the aristocratic society. All the women are going to be freaked out that this pirate's going to show up and ruin their tea set. And then he's going to come back, restore the plate, bang Lady Selkirk. Then all the aristocratic men are going to be furious because John Paul Jones, the pirate, is showing up, stealing tea sets, and banging their wives. It's the ultimate form of psychological warfare. So the USS Ranger set sail, they leave the Selkirk estate, and at this point, it's literally only been a day. All of the events that we just covered, Whitehaven and the Selkirk estate, was just April 23rd. It is now April 24th, and John Paul Jones could probably head back to France and be a hero because he's just conducted a major psychological warfare operation. But you know what'd be even funnier? Since there's probably now a bunch of British military vessels in the area, it'd be pretty cool if he strategically transferred one to his possession. He's gonna go steal a British warship and be the first man to ever do it. So he starts making his way back towards Whitehaven, looking for British military vessels. He comes across some fishing ships, gets up close, talks with the people on the fishing ships, and is like, "Hey, have you seen any British warships around?" They give him intel. They haven't seen any over towards Whitehaven, but right across the channel, about 70 miles away, there is a British warship over near Belfast. Perfect. John Paul Jones disguises the USS Ranger as a merchant vessel and then puts on a British uniform. He then proceeds to sail really close to the HMS Drake, pretending to be a British merchant vessel in distress, so the HMS Drake goes out to investigate. The HMS Drake sends over a boarding party to see what's wrong. He politely greets them, lets them get up on the deck, at which point he says, and I quote, "You're my prisoner, sir, and I'm John Paul Jones."
Gotcha, bitch.
They then raise the American flag, which essentially forces the HMS Drake to engage them in open water. Now here's the tricky part. John Paul Jones doesn't just want to sink the HMS Drake, he wants to capture it and tow it back to France. Luckily, he's got Marines and he knows how to use them, so they start dancing around the HMS Drake and he gives the order to his Marines to use their muskets and start picking off every officer and every man above deck. After an hour of combat, John Paul Jones's men have sustained 6 casualties and the British 42, including all of their senior leadership, at which point the HMS Drake is forced to surrender. John Paul Jones is now the first American to capture a British warship. But what good is that if nobody knows about it? So he doubles back, goes back to the fishermen that originally gave him the intel, sails up next to him, gives them a cut of the sail and a bunch of gold, and gives them instructions to go tell the story to everybody that'll listen.
You just make sure people know what happened here today.
He then sails back to France and he is a fucking hero, and it is a massive party. He ends up getting gifted wielded a French officer's sword and hanging out with a bunch of French women with his buddy Benjamin Franklin. The American and British newspapers are talking about how he's the first American to capture a British warship. He launched a raid on Whitehaven. He's the first man to attack Great Britain in over 100 years, and he invaded the Selkirk estate and only took a single plate, proving that he was a gentleman, sending the message that he could have done a lot more if he wanted to. In contrast, the British newspapers are freaking out, calling him a barbaric pirate that has the audacity to attack nobility. After the parties and the celebration dies down, the political bullshit sets in. John Paul Jones is like, okay, I've proved myself. Give me a better ship and then give me some more ships to support me. Let me take an entire fleet out and go do this. I'll wreak havoc everywhere. But for some reason, the government just isn't doing anything. They won't give him a fleet. They keep offering him like bullshit tiny ship after bullshit tiny ship. He's writing letters of protest to everybody.
You got to understand why they're doing that. He's done nothing but win with those little tiny ships, and he's taken over. Everything he's pretty much gained is from theftery. So they just give him more of the tiny ships, give him more men through there, and see what else he can do. I understand why they would do that. It's not fair.
That'll listen, and in one of these letters, he writes one of the most famous quotes in U.S. naval history. I wish to have no connection with any ship that does not sail fast, for I intend to go in harm's way. Translation, I want to haul ass and beat ass, give me a fucking ship. After like 6 months, they finally give him a 42-gun ship that he renames the Bomb Richard, which translates to the Poor Richard, which is a play on Benjamin Franklin's Poor Richard's Almanac. In addition to that, they give him 4 other smaller ships and 380 men, and he now has his own little fleet. And on October 17th, 1779, they leave port to distress the enemy even more. For the next month and a half, they just sail up and down the British coast, wreaking havoc. They seize 12 merchant vessels. They make landings in Ireland and Scotland, forcing the British to scramble and panic. Then on September 23rd, 1779, the grand finale, his little fleet comes up on a massive fleet of 40 British cargo ships. The only problem, they're being guarded by 2 British warships, the HMS Serapis, which is a massive 50-gun frigate, and her support ship, the HMS Countess of Scarborough. Okay, here's the problem. The HMS Serapis, absolutely on paper, should beat the Bomb Richard, okay? Despite what John Paul Jones wanted, the Bomb Richard is not a fast military ship. It was a merchant vessel that he converted into a warship. It's big, it's slow, it's clunky, it's old. But you know what? Fuck it, he's got Marines, we're gonna figure it out. So John Paul Jones is gonna take his weakness and turn it into a strength. What's his weakness? He doesn't have a ship that's that great. He doesn't really care about the ship. That's actually a strength. You gotta realize this is vehicle on vehicle combat, okay? If you're having road rage with some dude in a Lambo and you're driving a 1994 clapped out F-150, you think you're gonna let the dude in the Lambo win? No, you have nothing to lose. So John Paul Jones opens up the fight by pulling up right next to the Serapis and lashing the ships together. John Paul Jones has just turned this into a close quarters slugfest, and he's got Marines. They're opening up with their muskets, their blunderbusses, they're throwing grenades. It is a shit show. The Serapis is opening up with its cannons, blowing the Bomb Richard to smithereens, at which point it becomes obvious the Bomb Richard is gonna sink. The British officer yells over to John Paul Jones, "Are you ready to surrender?" To which he famously replies, "I have not yet begun to fight." He then orders the entire ship to board the HMS Serapis, and they engage in close quarters combat for 3 hours. John Paul Jones and his crew win, forcing the British to surrender on their own vessel. He then cuts the Bomb Richard loose and lets it sink. And while all that was going on, the other British support ship was being engaged by the other ships in his fleet, and they surrendered too. They then spend the next 10 days evading the British Navy and get their ships into a Dutch harbor. Now, there's a huge problem. When the Bomb Richard went down, it took the American flag with it, and he's not about to fly the British flag on the ship that he just took from the British. So essentially, he has no flag on either of these ships. Okay, to us, this doesn't seem like a big deal. Back then, humongous fucking deal, because if any warship sails into a harbor not flying a recognized flag, they're immediately considered a pirate. And the British have already been saying that John Paul Jones is a pirate, and harboring a pirate is illegal, and it would justify the British going to war with the Dutch if they're harboring a fugitive, which is exactly what John Paul Jones looks like right now. So this is a diplomatic emergency, and the Dutch are in a tough spot. They don't want to go to war with America or England, and those are pretty much the only two possibilities if they weigh in. So they just
they wouldn't have went to war with America. The Dutch were secretly financing and funneling money and weapons to the states, the colonies, with the help of France and Spain. So they wouldn't have been involved in that, but they would have had severe recourse from the British, which I think they did after the war. I think it was financial.
kind of stall as long as they can. While that's going on, the Americans are scrambling to have a new American flag made, and they just kind of have to go off like a loose description. There's like 13 stripes, red, white, and blue, and there's like a field of stars in blue. And what the seamstress or flag maker comes up with is the Serapis flag. And they're like, fuck it, that's close enough, fly the colors, diplomatic emergency solved. And from here, everything goes to shit. John Paul Jones is ordered to turn over the Serapis to the French because technically they're the ones that gave him the Bombe Richard and financed the entire endeavor. So that's their ship now, and he is then sent back to America. Once he gets back to America, he is given a golden medal by Congress, which is the equivalent to a Medal of Honor back in this point in time, similar to the one that Daniel Morgan was given because the Medal of Honor didn't exist yet. He is then pretty much stuck behind a desk on administrative duty because the United States Continental Congress doesn't think that they actually need to have a strong naval presence once the war is over and the war is winding down and it's looking like America's gonna win. John Paul Jones continues to advocate and is very adamant that America should have a massive, strong, powerful navy, but nobody wants to listen to him. The American Revolutionary War comes to an end and the Continental Navy is essentially disbanded because America has no interest in having a navy other than defending its own shores, and now John Paul Jones has nothing to do. Then in 1787, Catherine the Great of Russia comes knocking because she's fighting the Russo-Turkish War and she needs experienced sailors to go help her win this war, and John Paul Jones gets the offer and he takes it. With the permission of Congress, he goes over, he fights for Russia, fucks up the Ottoman Empire, and politics strikes again. They don't want some foreigner getting all the credit for these massive successful naval engagements, so they end up giving the credit to some other dude that's politically connected.
Fuck me, right?
On top of that, guess which other country Catherine the Great is recruiting naval officers from? The British. Guess who hates John Paul Jones? The British. Because of that, they then frame him and claim that he assaulted a 12-year-old girl, which did not happen. Almost every historian agrees on that. But the scandal was so big and so large that Catherine the Great determined that it just wasn't the political impact of taking Jones's side, so she cuts him loose. John Paul Jones then retires to Paris, France in 1790 because he knows the most people there and he had the most fun there with Benjamin Franklin. He's writing back to the United States, offering his services, offering to help them found a United States Navy and build up the Navy that America should have, and nobody wants to listen. And then 2 years later in 1792, John Paul Jones would pass away from kidney disease and is buried in what amounts to an unmarked grave in obscurity in France, where he remained for over a century. It wasn't until 1899 that America's French diplomat, another war hero that had earned the Medal of Honor, Horace Porter, spent 6 years trying to track down his remains, and he finally did it in 1905. Then, under Teddy Roosevelt, his remains were exhumed and transported back to America, with an inscription that reads, John Paul Jones, 1747 to 1792, U.S. Navy, 1775 to 1783. He gave our Navy its earliest traditions of heroism and victory. And that is a story.
I think he's buried at Quantico in Virginia, I believe. I don't have my phone near me, but I believe that's where he's buried. But yeah, I got a John Paul Jones book, and the first page inscription is from Teddy Roosevelt, basically saying he's the father of the American Navy, and every seaman should know his story, his life story. So.
Story of John Paul Jones, the father of America's Navy. He is credited with capturing or sinking at least 46 enemy ships, killing over 3,000 enemy combatants, and taking over 2,000 prisoners. He was the first man to raise the American flag over the United States Navy's first warship. He was there when the Marine Corps made their first amphibious landing. He is the first man to invade Great Britain in over 100 years, and he is the first American to capture a British warship. And yeah, he actually got that silver plate back to Lady Selkirk. I like to think he got lucky. She later described him as noble. So in conclusion, that's John Paul Jones, and it's a name you should remember. Thanks for watching. Best way.
Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Damn. Let me go back. Maybe I'll remember.
She later described him as.
Oh, yeah. So I was looking at this picture. So, not an American citizen, obviously, Scottish descent, but he's another story in American history of an immigrant who showed up because he didn't think he was going to be able to make a name for himself, came to America, got a name for himself. Like that's kind of the story of the U.S., the story of America. It's you can come here and you can be somebody, make a name for yourself, and I think that's a great story. Not just him, but so many others. It's important to feel like you can go somewhere and be something, and that's why the U.S. was a beacon. Maybe not as much today, but should be. Well, I'm going to end it here. I hope you enjoyed. John Paul Jones is just awesome. Until next time, have a good day, have a good night.